Hi, I'm Ron DeHaas. I'm the CEO of Covenant Eyes, and we are here with Greg Oliver today, who has some great things to tell us about his website and the work that he's doing in recovery from pornography addiction. Greg Oliver is the founder and the executive director of an organization called Awaken. The website is awakenrecovery.com. We also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/awakenrecovery. And I would certainly encourage our viewers to visit that website and the Facebook page as well. Greg, I want to welcome you to our Facebook Live here at Covenant Eyes. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, it's great to be with you. I met you at the Set Free Summit last year. It's good to talk to you again.
Yes, it was great to meet you. And that was a great summit, wasn't it?
That was a great summit, wasn't it? My goodness, that was amazing.
It was. It was really amazing. It was. It was really amazing. Well, thank you for being here. I want you to tell us about your ministry at awakenrecovery.com. But first of all, I want to just introduce it because I was on your website and I was looking. If I were an addict, a pornography addict, and I've tried over and over again to overcome this addiction. I've tried all kinds of things, and I'm basically now at the point where I don't even really necessarily believe that I can overcome it. So you have a quote on your website that made it sound simple. It said, all you need to do is take the first step. And so I guess the question I have is, what is that first step to overcome pornography addiction?
Well, yeah, and thank you for asking that. And it is actually simple, but I don't want to confuse anybody who's watching into thinking that simple means easy. We use those terms a lot, and we try not to confuse them because we try to keep it simple as in uncomplicated, because doing the simple thing is extremely difficult to do, especially when you've been bogged down and enslaved in addiction for a long time. So my answer to your question would be the first step is honesty, is actually telling the truth about what's going on. And I think there's kind of two facets to that. I think you have to be honest with yourself and acknowledge that there's been some self-deceit going on for whatever period of time the pornography use and the addictive compulsive use has been happening. Lies like, I can stop whenever I want to, or, well, yeah, this is a problem, but I can fix it if I try harder. This isn't hurting anyone. All of those things are lies that we believe, and we have to be honest with ourselves and say, this is bigger than me. This is controlling large portions of my life. And as much as I, as a Christian, want to stop, I can't stop, and I don't understand why. So I think we've got to be honest with ourselves, and then that kind of pushes us to the next part of that first step, which is being honest with somebody else. And my goodness, that's the hardest part of all, because a lot of what drives pornography addiction is isolation. There's a fear that if anybody knows what I'm doing, that's going to be the end of the relationship. There's going to be rejection. There's going to be shame. I'm going to lose my reputation. Nobody's going to think well of me. And the longer that I isolate, the more that cloud just continues to swirl around my mind and my heart, and I just can't think or see straight. And so honesty with somebody else is critical because, number one, it gets me out of isolation. I tell people in our recovery groups all the time, you're not alone anymore now unless you choose to be. Once they've stepped into that room and they've gotten their first glimpse of community, now they've got a choice. They realize it because they've seen it in flesh and blood right in front of them. Being honest with other people allows somebody else to tell me the truth. Ron, there's a verse that I use constantly with men and women that my wife Stacy and I work with in recovery, and it's Hebrews 3:13, where it says to encourage one another every day, as long as it's called today, so that none of you are hardened by sin's deceitfulness. And that's really a lot of what's going on in the heart and mind of an addicted person. When we isolate, we don't allow anybody to know us well enough to be able to speak the truth that we need to hear. And so the only voice that we hear, the only voice I heard in all my years of addiction was the enemy and my own inner critic telling me I was never going to change. So telling somebody else allows them to encourage us in the right way and helps us to realize the lies we've been believing, exposes the truth about how addiction works, that it's not just that I'm a terrible person. There's actually things going on that have gotten out of my control. And then it lets me know about solutions that I can take in that second and third and fourth step. But I think really just in my long-winded answer to your question, the first step is to be honest about what's going on and to let somebody else be a part of it.
But Greg, you
talk about isolation and you say I'm not alone, but well, if I'm addicted to pornography, I sure feel alone.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't want to talk to either my wife or my pastor yet. So what do I do?
Well, there are a couple of safe and confidential places where you can go. If you go to see a therapist, then one of the things that you're paying for, in addition to their expertise, is their confidentiality, their professional obligation that they not share what you share with them outside of that office, unless, of course, it's a reporting issue, unless there's something that's put other people at risk or has to be reported. If I'm addicted to pornography and I'm not ready yet to tell my wife, there's something in me that knows I need to do that, but I got to warm up to that sometimes because of fear, because of, the impending sense of doom and consequences. And so sometimes I've got to practice by sharing with another person first. And so a counselor is a great place to start. Finding a support group is a great place to start. Even though support groups are made up of people who are there voluntarily, and so you can't promise or guarantee anonymity, one of the things that's a benchmark of a support recovery group is the fact that you can count on one another to keep it within the room. What's said in here stays in here, and we don't talk outside of the group about who we saw or really specifically what was said. Those are two things right there that that I didn't really believe were options. Like, my story is I was a worship pastor during the time that I was, battling, well, not really battling, I was getting pummeled by sexual addiction. And the stakes were so high that I feared that if I told anybody that that's going to mean a devastation of everything that was going on in my life. I would lose my job. I might lose my family. I would totally lose my reputation. But I didn't even really trust in counseling. But that's really, if you're getting to the point where with your addictive behavior, you just kind of can't live with it anymore, that's a great place to start, is with a counselor, and I think in combination with a support community.
So now you and your wife, Stacy, provide coaching for people who are in this issue of pornography addiction.
We do.
Can you relate to us a little bit about what that looks like, what that involves?
Sure. The difference that we see between what we do and what a therapist is going to do is really kind of the difference between looking backwards and looking forward. There are things that we're not qualified to do in terms of a therapeutic sense of the work that needs to happen in a lot of these people's lives. I believe that all addictive behavior is comfort-seeking behavior. And I believe that when we get addicted to anything, I'm trying to meet a legitimate need or deal with a legitimate pain through an illegitimate source. And I got to get to the bottom of what's been driving that, kind of the root issues that have been present my whole life, but that I haven't learned how to process correctly. And so we really strongly recommend that people see a counselor first, either before or sometimes even while they're seeing us for coaching. Coaching really takes a forward look. Ideally, it's when people have got a little stability now. The fog has lifted. I got some steady ground under my feet. I've begun to learn about a recovery process. And now I want to look forward and I want to set some goals. What are some personal goals in pursuing recovery? What are some relationship goals that we have as a couple? Assuming that the couple are both staying in it, which is always the goal that we hope for and that we pray for. And so Stacy and I, out of our own experience, are able to share on a little bit more personal level than a therapist often can do professionally, and say, well, these are the things that we've learned. These are the things that have worked for us, and we can really kind of just draw out what's oftentimes already there, and they just need somebody to point it out. Like, you have the potential, and you've got what it takes to keep on this path and to move forward. So it's really kind of like life coaching, related to recovery and, marriage and individual relationships for people who are in recovery.
We're talking with Greg Oliver from the website, awakenrecovery.com. And Greg, on your website, there is the website, and we'll put this in the comments so that people can go right there.
Great.
awakenrecovery.com/roots retreat.
Yes.
If I click on that, what am I going to find?
You are going to find information on our men's recovery intensive. I'm talking about therapy. And for a lot of people who are at or near the beginning of a recovery journey, one really fantastic resource is to participate in a recovery intensive. There are inpatient options for therapy, and then there are also outpatient options. The Roots Retreat and intensives like it are outpatient options. They take place over 4 days. We have specialized therapists who specialize in sexual addiction who come, and it's group therapy. And it's kind of like if going to a counselor once and then seeing what you think about it and then going back the next week, if that's kind of like dipping your toe in the pool and kind of slowly wading in from the shallow end, going to a recovery intensive is kind of like doing a cannonball into the deep end. It's really experiencing the equivalent of several months worth of therapy, all in an immersive, uninterrupted setting over the course of 4 days. And it can be a great catalyst for somebody to get a lot of context into what's been going on. What have I been believing? How's that manifested in my behavior? What are some things I need to believe and allow God to heal in terms of my belief system so that the behavior will then follow? And so we offer those Roots Retreats for men 3 times a year. We actually have one coming up in just a few weeks, October 26th through 29th. If they go to awakenrecovery.com/Roots Retreat, there will be information on how they can find out more and sign up for that. We've had people from Central Alabama all the way to North Dakota, New Jersey, other states come and be a part of our intensives. And so we'd love to have anybody ask us about that. But we also have a Roots Retreat for women. And if they, after the / if they type Roots Retreat Women, that will take them to information on our spouse's trauma and healing intensive. So that's a therapeutic experience for the wife or the partner of a male sex addict who has been traumatized by his behavior and the discovery or the disclosure of that behavior. And so it's really 2 different approaches, one for the person who's struggling and then another for the spouse partner who's been affected by the addictive behavior. So we're really excited. We just had our first women's Roots Retreat last month, and it was amazing. We have our next one scheduled for January.
And just to emphasize, I don't have to travel to Alabama to participate in these. Is that right?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I don't have to travel to Alabama to participate in these retreats.
In the retreats, actually, yeah, these are in person. We do have some options within the ministry where people can participate remotely. Our support group community includes times throughout the year where we offer 12-step study groups, and those can be participated in via video conferencing technology. But the Roots Retreat is an in-person event, and so we have people who travel in for that. We try to keep the costs as low as we can in order to enable people who need to travel to make it affordable. But yeah, that's something that you have to be in person for.
Well, Greg, it's great talking to you. I'm going to go back to here I am, a porn addict, and I visited your site and say, take the first step, and I take that first step, and maybe I see a little light at the end of the tunnel. So, Greg, tell me, what is at the end of the tunnel? Is there hope? If you had one message that you could give to people who are in my position, being a porn addict, and I feel alone, isolated, I feel helpless and hopeless, and now I maybe see a little light at the end of the tunnel. What would be the one message you could tell people?
I would tell them that absolutely there's hope. I understand the sense of no hope because when we try to fix it ourselves, we don't see anything that gives us reason to hope. But when we'll bring somebody else into it with us, we can begin to understand, number one, it's not just me. There are other people who've walked this path. My own experience, I'm almost 9 years into recovery myself, and it works. You know, when I say it works, in AA for 80 years, they've been saying keep coming back. It works if you work it. This is a process through which God has made the changes that I tried to make on my own. I was trying to do God's job for him. And once I brought somebody, well, I didn't bring him into it. I was caught. So it was kind of forced on me. But once other people were brought into my process, I was able to get the help that I needed. And it's made all the difference in the world. If somebody is flirting with that idea of telling someone and they're just terrified, then you know what? Go to your email and send one to info@awakenrecovery.com. It'll come directly to me. And you can tell me. You can let me be the first person that you tell. I'm not going to tell anyone. I can help you find therapists in your area. I can help you find recovery resources. I can give you encouragement. And sometimes that's all it takes to convince us that this is worth really checking out and looking into. But I can promise you that without bringing someone else into this, it's not going to work. A sexual addiction is an intimacy disorder. We're looking for connectivity. We're not going to find that in isolation. And so I would really encourage you to take that scary first step and reach out to someone.
Greg Oliver, awakenrecovery.com. I just want to thank you so much for joining us. Facebook Live. We're doing this Facebook Live and also YouTube. You can visit us on our YouTube channel. Please go on our YouTube channel and like us as well. And I would encourage you to join me, the listener, to join me in visiting facebook.com/awakenrecovery and like that page as well. The more traffic they get, of course, that adds to the search engine optimization. So always glad to help out a great resource like your ministry is, Greg. So thank you.
So Ron, thank you so much.
Yeah, and I can't thank you guys enough.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's been great to share.